Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me. It's this Christmas week, and we'll be here, and hope you'll be listening as well as we cover a number of things this week. Of course, we'll be off Christmas Day, but I just wanted to let you know that we're going to be looking at some of the things that have happened even over the weekend at a Democratic presidential debate, and so we'll play a few of those clips a little bit later in this hour just to give you a chance to hear what you may or may not have watched or heard about, and there were a few things that are worth noting. And we'll spend a little bit of time talking about some of the things that have been happening over the weekend. One of those, of course, is the Star Wars movie. We're going to have a lot more to say about movies and television tomorrow, really devoting the first hour or so to television, the second hour tomorrow to movies. So we'll have a chance to talk about some of the concerns that parents have about what's being shown on television. Then Ted Bear will be with us second hour to talk about, the good and the bad in terms of some of the movies that you might want to watch. And then we'll be even getting into on Wednesday things that you can do in your church to really mobilize individuals so that they will be more aware of what is happening in the political arena and even know which candidates support their values. So we've got a lot to cover this week. And I might just mention in the second hour, Michael Kendrick will be with us. We talk about his new book, Your Blueprint for Life: How to Align Your Passion, Gifts, and Calling. This is a book that would be very appropriate as we get closer to the end of year and you begin to think about what you want to do for New Year's, because sometimes that's what many of us do in terms of forming some resolutions and beginning to say, maybe I need to get out of the doldrums here and maybe there's some changes that I need to make in my life, and he will really challenge you to do that. And that happens in the second hour today. Over the weekend, those of us that are MCs always dread this, and I'm not going to spend more time on it than it deserves, but Steve Harvey was the actual MC and host of the Miss Universe pageant. And if you haven't seen this has got to be the all-time fear of any of us that stand in front of an audience and are actually the masters of ceremonies. And I've done this so many times over the years where I've spoken, and then there'll be a reaction from the audience, and I think, did I say something wrong? Did somebody tell me something? Did I mispronounce a name? Well, this was about as bad as it can get, because he then, of course, was celebrating the fact that Miss Columbia actually won the Miss Universe. They put the crown on her. They're ready to go. And all of a sudden, it turns out, whoops, he comes back in and says, okay, folks, I have to apologize. The first runner-up is Colombia. Turns out Miss Philippines was the winner. And again, maybe a lesson to be learned here. Owned up to the mistake rather than trying to blame it on anybody else. Just simply explain that. And I think most of the people in the blogosphere said, well, anybody could make that mistake, and it was very unfortunate, and it's one that probably haunt him for some time. But nevertheless, if you've ever been in front of an audience and everybody reacts, or else you sit down and realize you didn't say the right thing and you have to get back up and clarify something, you know only so well what that's like. It's one thing to do it on live radio. It's another thing to do it in front of an audience where most of the people in the world are watching, or at least people from different parts of the world. I shouldn't say most of the people, lots of people watching the Miss Universe pageant and find out that he made a mistake. So anyway, just one of those little things that all of us fear when we stand in front of an audience. But I would like to spend just a minute talking about Star Wars. I can't imagine that there are too many people in the audience that either have been to it or have met people that have. And this is a franchise that looks like it's going to really take off this year. Opening weekend, there are all sorts of estimates from $238 million to $247 million brought in. what's $9 million amongst friends. But anyway, whatever it is, I'll use the 247 number that's now being used. That is the best opening weekend ever. There were two films in the past that had opening weekends of over 2 million. That was The Avengers and Jurassic World. And of course, those two went on to bring in more than $600 million. And then, of course, James Cameron holds the record, of course, with Avatar, $760 million. But, of course, it only had an opening weekend of about $77 million. So some people are wondering whether this bodes well. But as some people have written, this may not necessarily continue. But then again, they don't know how loyal people are to Star Wars. But you have to recognize that, as we will talk about tomorrow with Ted Baer, there are a lot of other movies coming out here in January that probably will do very well on the box office. And I've always wondered about this idea that if I go to one movie, I won't go to the other movie. If they're both good movies, I'll go to both of them. But nevertheless, you've got Concussion coming out, The Big Short, Joy, Point Break, Daddy's Home, to mention just a few. Then there's some others that will be coming out that are probably a little less known. We'll probably spend some time tomorrow talking about that with Ted Baer. And, of course, we'll also spend some time talking about this phenomenon that we've really discussed many times here on the program about the incredible popularity of a lot of these Christian-based films. Certainly, War Room is at the top of the list, but many others have done very well as well. So we're going to get into some of the conversation that we'll have tomorrow about some of the movies. And I thought I just would at least acknowledge that never had an opening like this. 247 million. That's the number I'll use. Some say 238 million. Doesn't make any difference. It blew number one out of the water and will, I think, continue to do so for some time. So many people that have gone to it said they thought it was one of the best ever. So word of mouth always helps, and we'll see how it plays out in the future. Well, we're going to spend most of our time in the next few minutes talking about the Democratic presidential debate. Took place on Saturday. Now, a question might cross your mind. Why did you put it on Saturday? I mean, not only are you going against some of these Christmas shows, but NFL football and all sorts of other things are going on. And, of course, I believe that that was intentional. There has always been sort of a belief on the part of those who were especially running the Democratic National Party that this is going to be a coronation for Hillary Clinton. Let's not put her out there so that she might make a mistake or a stumble that could be used against her. Let's simply give those few party faithful an opportunity occasionally to watch a debate. We'll put it here just less than a week before Christmas. During the weekend, it will guarantee that not a lot of people will watch it. And as a result, then we'll protect the preeminent front runner, and that's where it will go. So when we come back, what I want to do is give you a chance to hear a few comments from each of the candidates. Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, and Martin O'Malley. Won't spend a lot of time on that, although I do want to also point you to some of the articles we've posted. One that came out that sort of talked about the winners and losers. The assumption was the winner was Hillary Clinton. The losers were Bernie Sanders, Martin O'Malley, and ABC, because ABC certainly played this on a Saturday. Second of all, even when you tuned in at 8 o'clock Eastern time, you weren't tuning into the debate. You were tuning into a round table for a while before the debate even took place. Some people complaining about that. And then a piece that has been put forth by Kevin Williamson, and I'm not the only one that decided to post it on my website. A number of other people are quoting from it today, kind of the theme for the Democratic Party in 2016. So those articles are available on the website, pointofview.net. And as you go there, I think you'll find a lot of resources. But when we come back, we'll spend a little bit of time talking about Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders and Martin O'Malley. And I guess we have to talk about Donald Trump. Some people said he may have been a winner. And no individual was mentioned more often, seemingly, during the Democratic presidential debate than Donald Trump. And that actually might help him out. We'll see how it works out. But you'll have a chance to hear some of the comments they made. And, of course, I'd love to get your comments as well. This Christmas week, if you'd like to join us at any point, feel free to give us a call, 1-800-351-1212. We'll talk about that Democratic presidential debate right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
This is Christmas week, and so I thought we might reflect on the hymn, O Holy Night by John Dwight. O holy night, the stars are shining brightly. It is the night of the dear Savior's birth. Long lay the world in sin and error pining, till he appeared and the soul felt its worth. Jesus came into the world to save us, and so we feel valuable and our souls feel its worth. Perhaps the most quoted verse in the Bible is John 3:16. It tells us that Jesus came because God so loved the world. He came so that our souls would feel their worth to God. This hymn also asks us to consider the fact that the King of Kings was born as a human infant and placed in a manger. The King of Kings lay thus in lowly manger, in all our trials born to be our friend. He knows our need, to our weakness is no stranger. Behold your King, before him lowly bend. Isn't it amazing that there were some who were willing to worship him, even while merely a babe in the manger? This hymn then now talks about how we should respond to one another in humility. Truly he taught us to love one another. His law is love, and his gospel is peace. Chains shall he break, for the slave is our brother, and in his name all oppression shall cease. You know, we no longer have slavery in this country, but it is true that many people are still enslaved to various forms of sin and need Jesus as their Savior. And we as believers are to model the humility that Jesus demonstrated when he stepped out of eternity into time and gave up his rights as God. This is a message we not only need at Christmas, but every day. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
This Christmas, bring home and share the gift of War Room on Blu-ray, DVD, and digital HD, available in stores December 22nd.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Saturday was the Democratic presidential debate. It's really, in a sense, the last one. There technically will be one after you have the Iowa caucus and before South Carolina, but by that time, I don't think it's even going to draw an audience, but I could be wrong. But I don't think at this point we are going to be hearing again from the Democratic nominees in this kind of forum. So it is worth mentioning, just for a few minutes at least, some of the things that were said. Let's start out with Hillary Clinton. Of course, Donald Trump, she feels, is a target-rich environment, so spends a fair amount of time in this particular clip talking about ISIS and, of course, Donald Trump.
Well, I think a lot of people are understandably reacting out of fear and anxiety about what they're seeing. First, what they saw in Paris, now what they have seen in San Bernardino. And Mr. Trump has a great capacity to use bluster and bigotry to inflame people and to make them think there are easy answers to very complex questions. So what I would say is, number one, we need to be united against the threats that we face. We need to have everybody in our country focused on watching what happens and reporting it if it's suspicious, reporting what you hear, making sure that Muslim Americans don't feel left out or marginalized at the very moment when we need their help. You know, I was a senator from New York after 9/11, and we spent countless hours trying to figure out how to protect the city and the state from perhaps additional attacks. One of the best things that was done, and George W. Bush did this, and I give him credit, was to reach out to Muslim Americans and say, we're in this together. You are not our adversary. You are our partner. And we also need to make sure that the really discriminatory messages that Trump is sending around the world don't fall on receptive ears. He is becoming ISIS's best recruiter. They are going to people showing videos of Donald Trump insulting Islam and Muslims in order to recruit more radical jihadists. So I want to explain why this is not in America's interest to react with this kind of fear and respond to this sort of bigotry.
Now, if you've been following the debate, you know that Hillary Clinton later had to recant some of that and walk that back. Of course, if nobody heard the debate, nobody knows that. But the argument has been now, no, it's not pictures of Donald Trump that are being used to recruit ISIS. It's some other people that you might know, but we'll leave it at that. But the point is I think you have kind of the, if you will, the campaign slogan that would be used against Donald Trump if indeed he becomes the Republican nominee. We don't need this kind of bigotry. We don't need to raise people's fear. We all need to be united. Now, again, might be difficult for Hillary Clinton to unite people behind her, but that's certainly the attempt that's going to be made by the campaign, and, of course, also to marginalize Donald Trump. So that, of course, gets us into one of the other questions that surfaced fairly early, and that is, all right, if we are going to fight and actually deal with terrorism, what does that require in terms of the kind of leadership necessary in the Middle East?
The reason we are in the mess we're in, that ISIS has the territory it has, is because of Assad. I advocated arming the moderate opposition back in the day when I was still Secretary of State because I worried we would end up exactly where we are now. And so when we look at these complex problems, I wish it could be either or. I wish we could say, yes, let's go destroy ISIS and let's let Assad continue to destroy Syria, which creates more terrorists, more extremists by the minute. No, we now finally are where we need to be. We have a strategy and a commitment to go after ISIS, which is a danger to us as well as the region. And we finally have a UN Security Council resolution bringing the world together to go after a political transition in Syria. If the United States does not lead, there is not another leader. There is a vacuum, and we have to lead if we're going to be successful.
You get a little bit of the back and forth that comes when individuals don't keep to their time slots. And again, I wish sometimes they'd back off a little bit because, after all, we're talking about very complex issues. And former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton has been in that office, whether you agree with her or not. Give her a chance to explain it before you then critique it or ask for a response. But anyway, that's the way these debates have gone, so I guess I shouldn't be surprised. Let's, if we can, move to Bernie Sanders for just a minute. And I thought it would be helpful for you to hear his opening statement, because even though there has been a real attempt on the part of Hillary Clinton to distance herself a little bit from Bernie Sanders, in some respects, she's been, in a guarded way, saying exactly what he has been saying in a much more bold way. And this is part of his opening statement.
Good evening. I am running for President of the United States because it is too late for establishment politics and establishment economics. I'm running for president because our economy is rigged, because working people are working longer hours for lower wages, and almost all of the new wealth and income being created is going to the top 1%. I'm running for president because I'm going to create an economy that works for working families, not just billionaires. I'm running for president because we have a campaign finance system which is corrupt, where billionaires are spending hundreds of millions of dollars to buy candidates who will represent their interest rather than the middle class and working families. I'm running because we need to address the planetary crisis of climate change and take on the fossil fuel industry and transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. I'm running for president because I want a new foreign policy, one that takes on ISIS, one that destroys ISIS, but one that does not get us involved in perpetual warfare in the quagmire of the Middle East, but rather works around a major coalition of wealthy and powerful nations supporting Muslim troops on the ground. That's the kind of coalition we need, and that's the kind of coalition I will put together.
Again, you see some of the strong statements being made, and it also brings me to a piece that we've posted here by Kevin Williamson, in which he says the Democratic theme for 2016 is totalitarianism. Now, that may seem a little strong, but stay with me for a minute, because he says at the beginning of December, Rolling Stone writer Jeff Goodell asked Secretary of State John Kerry whether Charles and David Koch, two libertarian political activists, should be considered, his remarkable words, an enemy of the state. By the way, those are the kind of words you use oftentimes in a totalitarian government. And he posed the same question about Exxon, and John Kerry, who could have been president in the United States. After all, he ran in 2004. And then, of course, has been Secretary of State. Look forward to, he said, to the seizure of Exxon's assets for the crime of proselytizing impermissibly about the question of global warming. At the very end of the column, he says, John Kerry can't quite answer the question of whether one of his political rivals should be declared an enemy of state, but it illustrates again that we're talking about a real forceful kind of set of statements being made by Bernie Sanders, which, even though softened perhaps by Hillary Clinton, illustrates exactly kind of the rough and tumble that I think we're going to be looking forward to with great fear and concern this next year, because when you begin to refer to individuals or agree with the premise that certain individuals or certain companies are the enemy of the state, that's the kind of question, if I got that, I said, well, wait a minute, I think that's a really strong statement. Instead, he kind of goes along with it and said, yeah, I can't wait to begin to seize Exxon's assets. And we'll talk a little bit more about what's even happening on the college campus. I think foretends what might indeed happen as we talk about this upcoming presidential campaign. And some of the strong statements made actually on both sides of the presidential aisle in these debates illustrates that it's going to be quite a campaign year, to put it mildly. But just before we go to a break, let me encourage you to take a minute right now for you to make a gift to Point of View. Your gift to Point of View, of course, is going to change lives, and we've been talking about how, if indeed we want to change the course of the nation, we certainly need to change lives. One of the stories we have there for you is a story of Vicky Garza, who started a campus ministry after listening to Point of View, and that ministry has helped to change the lives of all sorts of students. And so, first of all, I would encourage you to go to our website. Changing Lives, Changing Nation is the button there at pointofview.net. And, of course, you'll find some ways in which you can actually learn a little bit more about how, because of her listening to Point of View, she's been able to have such a profound impact on the lives of students. And her life, of course, was changed in large part because people like you in the past gave to Point of View. So please help change a life today with your gift to Point of View. The life you change will certainly change a nation, and we certainly encourage you to visit our website, pointofview.net. We've got some places where you can click on those buttons and learn a little bit more about some of these wonderful stories that we've been telling about. We have a little video there. It only takes you about a minute to watch, and I think it illustrates again how Point of View in the past has made such an impact. Give today so that we can continue to change lives and change a nation. You'll find that at the website, pointofview.net. Click on that button that says Changing Lives, Changing a Nation. We'll be right back.
Vicky Garza started a college ministry providing biblical care and counsel to students in crisis. She did that because of what she learned on Point of View. She heard Point of View because you, or someone like you, made a donation. It all began with a gift.
You don't know, when you give to Point of View, who you're touching and how much that person is going to be able to touch others. It could go out and touch thousands, even millions of people, because you were willing to invest in this ministry. I can't say enough about how it's touched my life and changed me completely.
Virtually everything God does in a human life involves many people and many simple acts. Vicky got involved, and I'm asking you to do the same. If you're concerned about America, invest in Point of View, and please do it right now before 2015 ends. Look for the Changing Lives, Changing the Nation banner at pointofview.net, or give using the Point of View radio app, pointofview.net. 151. Point of View will continue after this.
All my life, I always looked for ways to help people, but I would be frustrated because I didn't know how to help. And that's what I learned when I dialed in that day to Point of View. I learned how to help, not only myself and my family, but I also learned how to help others. And it's actually totally changed my life. We have this You Arise ministry now. It was started in January of 2012, and we are refining the model over here at SMU, but the idea is to bring health and wellness resources that are biblically based onto the campus through the RAs, so that when they're approached by students in need and who have some sort of crisis happening in their lives, they will be trained and able. You don't know when you give to Point of View who you're touching and how much that person is going to be able to touch others. And ultimately, it could go out and touch thousands, even millions of people, because you were willing to be a part of this ministry, to invest in this ministry. And I can't say enough about how it's touched my life and changed me completely.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Kerby Anderson.
Back again, and we'll spend a little more time talking about the Democratic presidential debate. Play a few clips for you, and then move on to some other topics. And don't forget, in the second hour, Michael Kendrick will be with us as we talk about his new book, Your Blueprint for Life. That's where you can kind of sit back and maybe say, maybe it's time to change some things in my life. How can I do that in a way that makes a difference and certainly is one that is God-honoring? So we're going to spend some time talking with him. But since we did have a Democratic presidential debate, and it may be the last one of any significance, I did want to give you a chance to hear just a few more comments from a few of the candidates. We've heard from Hillary Clinton. We heard one comment from Bernie Sanders. I'd like to now maybe get into that in a little more detail. One of the big issues coming into this debate was this data breach. And I think that Bernie Sanders, first of all, let's give him credit where credit was due, really did a pretty good job of explaining what happened, what went wrong, why it was wrong, and apologizing for it. So this is going to take a few minutes, but I thought it would be worthwhile since it was kind of front page news for a day or two last week. It was certainly news over the weekend, and I think it was beginning to fade away simply because Here's a good example. When you make a mistake, apologize. We talked about that a little bit earlier when we talked about Steve Harvey recognizing that he actually gave the Miss Universe crown to the wrong person. Sometimes the quickest way to get yourself out of a hole is to apologize and stop digging. So here is Bernie Sanders addressing that issue of the data breach.
Let me give you a little bit of background here. The DNC has hired vendors. On 2 occasions, there were breaches in information. 2 months ago, our staff found information on our computers from the Clinton campaign. And what our staff has said, whoa, what's going on here? They went to the DNC quietly. They went to the vendor and said, hey, something is wrong. And that was quietly dealt with. None of that information was looked at. Our staff at that point did exactly the right thing. A few days ago, similar incident happened. There was a breach because the DNC vendor screwed up. Information came to our campaign. In this case, our staff did the wrong thing. They looked at that information. As soon as we learned that they looked at that information, we fired that person. We are now doing an independent internal investigation to see who else was involved. Thirdly, what I have a real problem with, and as you mentioned, this is a problem. I recognize it is a problem. But what the DNC did arbitrarily, without discussing it with us, is shut off our access to our own information, crippling our campaign. That is an egregious act. I'm glad that late last night that was resolved. Fourthly, I look forward to working with Secretary Clinton for an investigation, an independent investigation, about all of the breaches that have occurred from day one in this campaign, because I am not convinced that information from our campaign may not have ended up in her campaign. Don't know that. But we need an independent investigation, and I hope Secretary Clinton will agree with me for the need of that. Last point. When we saw the breach 2 months ago, we didn't run into the media and make a big deal about it. And it bothers me very much that rather than working on this issue to resolve it, it has become many press releases from the Clinton campaign later.
But, Senator, you do mention the DNC, the vendor, but you said of your staff that they did the wrong thing.
Absolutely.
So does Secretary Clinton deserve an apology tonight?
Yes, I apologize.
Secretary Clinton, do you accept?
Not only do I apologize to Secretary Clinton, and I hope we can work together on an independent investigation from day one, I want to apologize to my supporters. This is not the type of campaign that we run. And if I find anybody else involved in this, they will also be fired.
Secretary Clinton, he's apologized. How do you react?
I very much appreciate that comment, Bernie. It really is important that we go forward on this. I know that you now have your data back and that there has been an agreement for an independent inquiry into what did happen. Obviously, we were distressed when we learned of it because we've worked very hard. I said in the beginning of this campaign, we wanted to reach as many voters as possible, and we have tens of thousands of volunteers doing that and entering data all the time to keep up with what people are telling us. And so now that I think, we've resolved your data, we've agreed on an independent inquiry, we should move on, because I don't think the American people are all that interested in this.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'll jump in here because you can kind of get the sense of what was happening there. And again, I think this is becoming a little bit of an issue because, as he pointed out, here they had information that showed up on their website. You'd have to be pretty naive to not think that some of the information Bernie Sanders or Martin O'Malley or anybody else showed up on the Clinton website, but nobody ever said anything about that. So we'll see how that plays itself out in the future. But just one more clip from Bernie Sanders, and then we'll move on to Martin O'Malley. And that is Bernie Sanders also was asked if indeed he would be a friend or a foe of Wall Street. He's pretty sure that Wall Street won't like him.
I think they won't. So Hillary and I have a difference. The CEOs of large multinationals may like Hillary. They ain't going to like me. And Wall Street is going to like me even less.
So again, you'll kind of see how that plays itself out. But nevertheless, just gives you a little bit of the back and forth. This is not going to be an issue that, say, a Donald Trump would bring against Hillary Clinton, but perhaps others might. So it will be interesting to see on the Republican side whether or not they could bring the same kind of argument against Hillary Clinton that Bernie Sanders is. Well, one more just before we take a break here. There has always been this back and forth between Martin O'Malley and Bernie Sanders about gun control, and I know some of you are concerned about that, so here's what they had to say.
Voted against the Brady bill. Senator Sanders voted to give immunity to gun dealers. And Senator Sanders voted against even research dollars to look into this public health issue. Secretary Clinton changes her position on this every election year, it seems, having one position in 2000 and then campaigning against President Obama and saying we don't need federal standards. Look, what we need on this issue is not more polls. We need more principle. When ISIL does training videos that say the easiest way to get a combat assault weapon in the United States of America is at a gun show, then we should all be waking up. We need comprehensive gun safety legislation and a ban on combat assault weapons.
Let me stay with gun control for a minute then. You talk about assault weapons. Even if you were able to ban the purchase of assault weapons tomorrow, Americans already own an estimated 7 to 10 million semi-automatic rifles. Would you make it illegal to own those weapons, force people to turn them in? And if not, how would banning the sales really make a difference?
Because, Martha, it would prevent people like the guy that just got charged yesterday, perhaps, from being able to buy combat assault weapons. You know, we are the only nation, only developed nation on the planet.
But again, I'm not talking about buying. Would you have them confiscated, the ones that are already here?
No, Martha, I would not. And that's not what we did in Maryland. But you know what we did in Maryland? We overcame the NRA's objections. We overcame all of the crowds that were coming down there. We did our own rallies. If we enact these laws in a prospective way, we can address a major vulnerability in our country. ISIL videos, ISIL training videos are telling lone wolves the easiest way to buy a combat assault weapon in America is at a gun show, and it's because of the flip-flopping political approach of Washington that both of my two colleagues on this stage have represented there for the last 40 years. We need common sense.
Let's calm down a little bit, Martin.
Yeah, let's tell the truth, Martin.
I am telling the truth.
Let's maybe have some rules here, commentators.
We will.
All right.
And let me just establish that for you, Senator, really quickly. Governor, we are going to call on you tonight. It's very clear you have a lot to say, but please wait until you're called upon. And, Senator, he invoked your record,
sure did.
and I'll let you respond.
Invoked mine
and
as
we'll
well.
get to you, too, as well.
Secretary. All right. For a start, we can do all the great speeches we want, but you ain't going to succeed unless there is a consensus.
Right.
In 1988, just to set the record straight, Governor, I ran for the U.S. House. We have one House member from Vermont. 3 candidates in the race. One candidate said, you know what? I don't think it's a great idea that we sell automatic weapons in this country that are used by the military to kill people very rapidly. Gun people said there were 3 candidates in the race. You vote for one of the others, but not Bernie Sanders. I lost that election by 3 percentage points, quite likely for that reason. So please, do not explain to me, coming from a state where Democratic governors and Republican governors have supported virtually no gun control. Excuse me. Do not tell me that I have not shown courage in standing up to the gun people, in voting to ban assault weapons, voting for instant background checks, voting to end the gun show loophole, and now in a position to create a consensus in America on gun safety.
Well, it gives you a little bit of the fireworks you did miss if you did not tune it in on Saturday, but just a little bit. Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, Martin O'Malley. Come back, just a couple other final comments, and I'd love to get some of yours. Certainly one of the issues front and center was corporate America. Another issue was gun control. Martin O'Malley says, no, I'm not going to confiscate yours, but if any of you are thinking about buying a semi-automatic rifle like an AR-15, better go out and buy it if he becomes president.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes. If you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. Had a chance to hear just a little bit of some of the comments by Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders and Martin O'Malley. Just before we wind those down, I thought I'd play one more just to get a smile on your face, and that has to do with Hillary Clinton. If she becomes the first president, then, okay, you got to think this through a little bit. You don't have a first lady, and so the traditional role of the spouse of the president would change, obviously, under Bill Clinton. And so, of course, that was one of the questions that was asked on Saturday night.
The role has been defined by each person who's held it. With respect to my own husband, I am probably still going to pick the flowers and the china for state dinners and stuff like that, but I will certainly turn to him as prior presidents have for special missions, for advice, and in particular how we're going to get the economy working again for everybody, which he knows a little bit about.
So again, just a couple of comments from the debate. You know, it's interesting that I've seen commentators on both sides, liberal and conservative, progressive and conservative, that have noticed that this is a very unusual campaign season. Just the other day, for example, I quoted quite a bit, and we have posted this on our website, a piece by William Galston. William Galston served under Bill Clinton in the Clinton administration. Now, he looks at some of the things that Donald Trump says with great disdain, as you might imagine, but also recognizes that there are some real problems right now in terms of the polarization of our political process. And deep in his article, he says, you know, throughout the West, democratic governments are struggling to maintain a post-war order premised on prosperity and economic security. Since the onset of the last recession, established center-right and center-left parties have failed to meet that test, opening the door to far-left and populist right. And he talks about from Hungary to France to Poland, you have this kind of rise of popularism. And in a sense, populism is surfacing right now in the candidacy of Bernie Sanders, and probably even, I think you could say, in the candidacy of Donald Trump. He goes on to say that Western democracies may be on different decks, but we all are in the same boat. In the world of mobile capital and global labor markets, we have not figured out how to maintain jobs and incomes for workers with modest education and skills. In Europe, the result has been sustained double-digit unemployment and a generation of young adults on the economic margins. The United States has made a different choice, large numbers of low-wage jobs that don't offer the promise of upward mobility. And the point he's making is this is sort of the oblique reality driving the rise of Donald Trump. But it also is surfacing in the debate that you saw with Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton, and I'll come back to more of that in just a minute. But he points out the fact that Americans already are experiencing this. He talks about, for example, a recent report from the Pew Research Center found that the median income for middle-income families is about where it was in 1997, which means any kind of gain that happened in the later part of the 1990s, the early part of the 21st century before the recession, have all gone away. And so you have individuals today that have seen no growth in their economy, no growth in their income, no growth, no, sort of upward mobility. Then when you look at lower income households, it stands where it did in 1996. So the point is, the picture is relatively bleak, and that's part of the reason for some of this popularism. But then Kevin Williamson, in the piece that I've posted today, I talk about, as we mentioned just a few minutes ago, the interview that was done by the writer with Rolling Stones, in which he was quite willing to say that he was looking forward to, John Kerry, former Secretary of State, looking forward to the seizure of Exxon's assets, because after all, they have questioned global warming. And he goes on in this piece to talk about what we've seen on these college campuses. He says on college campuses, they shout down unpopular ideas or simply forbid non-conforming views from being heard there in the first place. They've declared academic freedom to be an outdated concept and have gone full Orwell, declaring that freedom is oppressive and that they should not be expected to tolerate ideas that they do not share. You might say, well, that just happens on the college campus. It doesn't affect politics. Oh, yep. Hillary Clinton has certainly, in many cases, agreed with some of the statements by Bernie Sanders. And, of course, you've heard Bernie Sanders talk about the fact, and here Kevin Williamson says Bernie Sanders is calling for a revolution. And by revolution, he means crushing the economic and political rights of opponents in order to prevent them from having their say in political debate. Sounding oddly like Henry Ford, he sees as he talks about the scheming foreigners and international bankers working nefariously behind the scenes to undermine American interest, while his admirers brandy such traditional symbols of totalitarianism as the hammer and sickle flags. Then he goes on to talk about the fact that those in government have sought to use the FCC to revoke the broadcast licenses of Rupert Murdoch and other political hate totems, and have been long dreaming of using federal regulation to shut down conservative talk radio. They've gone to the Supreme Court to argue that they should be empowered to ban books, films, magazines, newspapers when they desire to do so for political reasons, and they are energetic suppressors of free speech. And by the way, while we're talking about the campus, again, we mentioned earlier in this year some of the things happening at the University of Missouri. I got this one. Right in the epicenter of racial unrest at the University of Missouri, you now have the executive director of the Student Health Center sent an email to staff members instructing them not to decorate their areas for the holidays in order to ensure a more safe and comfortable place for students. So don't put up any holly, don't put up any tinsel, don't have any things that say Christmas, and for certainly don't have anything that says that Jesus is the reason for the season. And of course, you can begin to see that this is why many people are becoming more concerned about what this campaign on both sides is meaning, because you no longer have anybody that's sort of speaking common sense ideas anymore. You have some of the radical ideas from Bernie Sanders, who is a self-avowed socialist. You have some of the comments made by Donald Trump. And, of course, you have all sorts of very important principles that Hillary Clinton has been espousing. One says she wants to go beyond what's called the Buffett rule on taxes, and that would be to increase the taxes on those who make $1 million 30% or more. She wants to exceed that. And, of course, we've talked in previous commentaries, matter of fact, my December 16th commentary, on all sorts of tax credit promises being put forth out there. So if you think that we have been through 7 years of a radical transformation of America, recognize that we have begun to just see the beginnings of much more that's being talked about in some of these debates. So I suspect many of you probably did not watch the Saturday debate. We played just a few of the clips. Gives you a little bit of an idea of at least what the Democratic Party is thinking. Last week we played some of those from the Republican Party, and you're going to have to make some wise decisions about who is going to be your elected representatives, not just for president, but also those who will be in the House and the Senate, and whether they will go along or begin to actually rebut some of the arguments being made in some of these Democratic and Republican debates right now. Just before we take a break, though, I wanted to once again encourage you to visit our website, pointofview.net. Just a minute ago, we mentioned Vicky Garza. We have some more information about her on the website. And again, what a great story of an individual that listened to Point of View and as a result developed a campus ministry. And that ministry has helped change the lives of students. And her life, in a sense, was changed because she listened to Point of View. And so people long ago giving to that ministry helped change her life, and now she's helping change the lives of students on college campus. And so again, I hope you'll see that you are part of this important change. As we change lives, we change the nation, and your gift will be so helpful in that regard. So please, just as we go to a break right now, go to the website, pointofview.net. You can watch that short 1-minute video, and then also make a gift. We certainly do encourage you to be generous, and anything you can do to help us would be greatly appreciated. Let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to learn a little bit more about how to develop a blueprint for life with Michael Kendrick. That coming up right after this.
Vicky Garza started a college ministry to students in crisis. She did that because of what she learned on Point of View. She heard Point of View because you or someone like you made a donation. It all began with a gift.
You don't know when you give to point of view who you're touching and how much that person is going to be able to touch others. I can't say enough about how it's touched my life and changed me completely.
Change a life, change the nation. Please invest now at pointofview.net, pointofview.net, or call 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151.
From Provident Films comes War Room. The movie that inspired audiences is coming to DVD and Blu-ray in time for Christmas.
This is my favorite place in this house. I call it my war room.
Prayer is a powerful weapon. War Room on DVD and Blu-ray. Available at Christian retailers December 22nd.
Point of View will continue after this.
All my life, I always looked for ways to help people, but I would be frustrated because I didn't know how to help. And that's what I learned when I dialed in that day to Point of View. I learned how to help, not only myself and my family, but I also learned how to help others. And it's actually totally changed my life. We have this You Arise ministry now. It was started in January of 2012, and we are refining the model over here at SMU, but the idea is to bring health and wellness resources that are biblically based onto the campus through the RAs, so that when they're approached by students in need and who have some sort of crisis happening in their lives, they will be trained and able. You don't know when you give to Point of View who you're touching and how much that person is going to be able to touch others. And ultimately, it could go out and touch thousands, even millions of people, because you were willing to be a part of this ministry, to invest in this ministry. And I can't say enough about how it's touched my life and changed me completely.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. Each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
There are times when we sometimes need to step back and say, maybe I need to do something a little different, or maybe I need to get out of my comfort zone. And whether it's the beginning of the year with New Year's resolutions, or whether it's just a frustration with normalcy and maybe mediocrity, and you say, I need to do something that is different, and something that maybe is challenging, and something that is certainly going to use my gifts and my passion and my calling in a way that honors the Lord. So that's what we're going to talk about this hour. New book out, Your Blueprint for Life, How to Align Your Passion, Gifts, and Calling with Eternity in Mind. It is written by Michael Kendrick. If you're not familiar with him, let me give you a brief bio, because he has so much that he has accomplished. President and CEO of Kendrick Capital Management, over 20 years of experience in investment, but originally graduated, interesting enough, an aerospace engineer. We're going to talk about that in just a minute, from Auburn, but then said, I need to come back and do something else. Has a master's degree in business administration, has really been involved since 1999 in his founding of Ministry Ventures, a nonprofit organization that is really dedicated to launching new ministries for Christ, and probably launched, as best I can determine, about 50 new different Christian nonprofit organizations, one of which I'm very familiar with, and that's I Disciple. Some of the material that I write is actually now going to be going on that platform. He's been a founding member and former elder at North Point Community Church, serves as well as the CEO and president of Blueprint for Life Ministries. So, Michael, welcome to Point of View today.
Well, good afternoon. It's great to be here. Thank you, Kerby.
Let's, if we can, tell your story for just a minute, because I thought it was kind of intriguing, because you thought, well, maybe I will go build rockets and things like that and go into aerospace. And at first, that seemed kind of exciting until you started looking at all the cubicles and begin to measure the distance between the cubicle where you are and the cubicle where your boss was, and then the cubicle where his boss's boss was. And you said, no, maybe this isn't something I'm cut out for. But tell the story, because I think it really helps understand why you've written this book, Blueprint for Life.
Well, you've definitely read the book there, because we described that scene whenever I got out of college, and I was so excited about doing aerospace engineering. I was always good in math, and I grew up around aircraft. And I said, well, why not? Let's marry the two and become an engineer and design airplanes. And so I showed up day one at a company called Pratt & Whitney Aircraft down in West Palm Beach, Florida. And I went up on the third floor where my cubicle was, and I looked out over this huge sea of desks, and boy, I got this kind of sinking feeling in my stomach. And then I saw the row of cubicles coming off the window. It had a very nice view out over this lake in Florida there, and the cubicle that I had was on the very end, and I counted the cubicles. There were 5 or 6 cubicles there to make it to the window. And the guy that sat by the window had been there probably 30 years as an engineer. And so I could see my career path right in front of my eyes.
Yes.
And it was kind of a scary thought to me. So I have to say, even though Pratt & Whitney is a great company, aerospace engineering is a great career path for many. We owe many of us in this country, aerospace engineers have built our military equipment to help defend our country here, and we owe our lives to that. But it just wasn't for me. I knew right away it wasn't for me, and so I started kind of at a young age of 23 trying to figure all that out. And as I always tell people, purpose and calling is not just an instant revelation generally. There may be times when God does that, but it's kind of a lifelong discovery. And as we all know, life takes its twists and turns, and opportunities come to us, and stages of life, we see different opportunities. We're equipped to do different things as we mature and get more experience. And God brings opportunities, people in our lives. So it's a lifelong journey. It's not a one-time thing. But I just knew at that moment I was going to pursue some different avenues. I knew I didn't want to be what I call a heads-down analytical engineer. I wanted to use some different gifts and skills, and I did. I went on, and I won't give you my whole life story there because that would be more than we want on the radio program today. But generally speaking, I always had a love for investing.
Yes,
I was able to get into software engineering, and I earned some money as a software salesman. And was one of their top salesmen for a company called McDonnell Douglas, which is another aerospace company. But we sold software, and was able to get enough money to start investing and becoming an entrepreneur. And started a restaurant when I was 28 years old, my wife and I. And quickly, there's an old saying that says, if you want to get rich, or how do you make a small fortune? You start with a large fortune and open a restaurant.
You learned that one. But I might just mention there was a time in which you had a kind of a break there and then did a lot of kind of work with a nonprofit group, and you were a cameraman and some other things. And that's when you said, no, I need to get back at work, because in some respects it gets back to the theme of your book. That is, we really want our listeners today to first of all figure out what are your passions? What do you love doing? And match that up with your giftedness. How are you highly skilled at doing something? And then tie that together with what God can accomplish in your life. And it seems to me that you kind of call that the life impact, or kind of the triangle. And in some respects, you were searching through some of that even as we were learning a little bit more about your life.
Well, I was, and kind of another great story in the book is that I was very, very blessed at age 31 we lost all our money in a restaurant and restaurant venture, and then I got into investing and really found that to be a sweet spot of mine. And so at age 31, I had garnered enough capital that I could just do my investing and not have to work in a day-to-day job for an employer. And so I found myself with a lot of discretionary time. And so I thought to myself, well, Lord, you must have freed all my time up so I could go into ministry. And so I began this journey of trying to dive in as kind of mostly a full-time ministerial, nonprofit type work, where I got involved, like you said, as a cameraman at the church. I got involved even in kind of conservative political campaigns. I got involved in pro-life movement. I got involved in a number of other ministry type efforts. And after about a year of just trying to get involved in nonprofit as my kind of the business of my business being a nonprofit person in the faith-based ministries, I just felt so unfulfilled. There was a void there. And it was weird because I had succeeded financially, so I was freed up to, quote, serve. And so I tried to go serve in these ministry capacities, but boy, there was just this hole still left. And I was pursuing God with all my heart. It wasn't like I had strayed from the faith. I was as fervent toward the faith as I had ever been in my life. But after about a year, Kerby, the Lord really showed me through a series of events and just really struggling with this, that He designed me to be a businessman.
Yes.
And that was what I was supposed to do. And that was my highest calling, was to be in business, because that's what He geared me for. That's what He made me. And it wasn't any less of a role for me in my life. It was my highest calling, was to be a businessman. And so I kind of got back into that and became really successful in investment banking. And I can share with you a little bit how God showed me how to use that for His kingdom work.
We'll do that when we come back.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
This is Christmas week, and so I thought we might reflect on the hymn, "O Holy Night" by John Dwight.
O holy night, the stars are shining brightly. It is the night of the dear Savior's birth. Long lay the world in sin and error pining, till he appeared and the soul felt its worth. Jesus came into the world to save us, and so we feel valuable and our souls feel its worth. Perhaps the most quoted verse in the Bible is John 3:16. It tells us that Jesus came because God so loved the world. He came so that our souls would feel their worth to God. This hymn also asks us to consider the fact that the King of Kings was born as a human infant and placed in a manger. The King of Kings lay thus in lowly manger, in all our trials born to be our friend. He knows our need, to our weakness is no stranger. Behold your King, before him lowly bend. Isn't it amazing that there were some who were willing to worship him, even while merely a babe in the manger? This hymn then now talks about how we should respond to one another in humility. Truly he taught us to love one another. His law is love, and his gospel is peace. Chains shall he break, for the slave is our brother, and in his name all oppression shall cease. You know, we no longer have slavery in this country, but it is true that many people are still enslaved to various forms of sin and need Jesus as their Savior. And we as believers are to model the humility that Jesus demonstrated when he stepped out of eternity into time and gave up his rights as God. This is a message we not only need at Christmas, but every day. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
This Christmas, bring home and share the gift of War Room on Blu-ray, DVD, and digital HD, available in stores December 22nd.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Privileged to have with us today Michael Kendrick. And again, his book is entitled Your Blueprint for Life, How to Align Your Passion, Gifts, and Calling with Eternity in Mind. It is published by Thomas Nelson, about 200 pages. Look for it in your local bookstore. But we also have a link to blueprintforlife.com. A book is endorsed by all sorts of individuals that we've had on this program. And as we go through this today, I think it will be providing, if you will, a blueprint for you to begin to discover the life you were born to live and to learn a little bit more about your passion, your gifts, and your calling. Michael, you're talking a little bit about going back into investing and recognizing that God really made you for the business world. And that's a good thing because we need to discover what our calling might be and how to use our passion and the gifts that we have for his glory.
Absolutely. I think many times people, as I did when I was just starting again this lifelong discovery process of your purpose and calling, I think we never truly arrive. It's just a journey. It's a wonderful journey that God puts us on throughout our life of how to best use our skills, gifts, and passions for his kingdom and his kingdom work. And we'll talk about that a little later about how we unpack that. But it occurred to me at that point in my life that my giftedness was in business. It wasn't to be a ministry person necessarily, to run a nonprofit and get involved in some of those things, but it was to go generate capital through business endeavors and utilize that capital to invest in others who were gifted to run those ministries. So I could have extreme leverage by using my gifts to generate income and cash, basically, to then gift into nonprofits. And so we started an investment banking firm in the early 90s, a partner of mine and I. And basically, I do want to tell you one quick thing that I believe was one of the keys to God blessing us, and that was when we started our business, we made a commitment from day one. And we were just kind of young. I mean, I want to say we were young and naive. We didn't think about it that deeply. We just said, we believed in tithing. It was just something both me and my partner had grown up with. And we just said, you know what? How about instead of tithing our profits, let's tithe our revenue. Let's take 10% of every dollar that comes into our firm before we pay a light bill or copier bill or any employees. Let's take 10 cents out of that revenue, put it in a giving fund, and let's run the business on 90 cents. And then if we have profits left over, we'll give some of those away too. But let's start at the top line, not the bottom line. And so we did that. We made that commitment. And Kerby, I will just tell you, God, I believe, quite frankly, that God just honored that simple decision. And we, in our first 3 years of business, we generated over $50 million in commissions in our investment banking company. And it was only a few people. We only had like a dozen employees. So you can imagine how much money we had both in our giving fund, but also excess resources with which to give. And so we just kind of dove into this wonderful, just this exhilarating point in our lives where God was blessing our business, and we were able to take a lot of those resources and plow into launching new ministries. And that's when we launched the Ministry Ventures Incubator. So we launched an incubator to help ministry entrepreneurs get their 501c3s started, and then we funded them and helped them create board of directors. So we launched about 50 different ministries out of that incubator. And now it's a coaching ministry. We coach hundreds of ministries annually. Ministry Ventures is the name of that organization. Still going strong 15 years later. And but the point here is that God can use you around your strengths. I think we sometimes stumble outside our strengths in pursuit of what God would have us do.
Yes.
But He's created our DNA very particularly, and this is something I love to point out, and we elaborate a lot around this in the book, is I love to point out that the exact way you were created is not a mistake. If you love God and you're pursuing Him, all you have to do is wrap that love for Him around the way He made you. Don't try to become something else. Don't try to pursue areas outside of your passions and strengths and gifts, because that's where struggle is, and that's where it gets hard. It's just a joy when you stay in your sweet spot, as I call it,
yes,
to serve the King and the kingdom. And I think there's a natural. I want to share with you. You may want to ask a different question, but sometime during the program, I do want to share with you the process with which I think that is best discovered. And again, that's what we kind of cover in the book. But that's a worthy topic as well.
Well, we'll get into the process in a minute, but there's another part of that. You talk about discovering your calling, but in the first couple of chapters, you use this phrase, hole in your soul, and I think I understand what that means, but that's another element in discovering your calling, isn't it?
It sure is. I love the metaphor that we use in the book, called a hole in your soul, and we use the metaphor of a heart shaped. And if you notice, a heart, it has two halves. It has, the two halves of the heart. And so if you can picture that, picture the left side of that heart, and God put this in every one of us. And, man is the only thing that go back to the story of creation, the only thing that God created that He breathed His Spirit into was mankind. And so I believe when He breathed His Spirit into mankind, He kind of left a hole in our soul. And I like to think of it, love is a very loving act, because here is what the two halves to me represent. One half is that God created us for intimacy with Him. That's the reason God created man, was for fellowship. That's what the Bible tells us. And so God desired fellowship with His creation. And so when He made mankind, He this kind of loving desire that He put in our heart was the first thing was intimacy with God. That unless we have intimacy with God through His Son Jesus Christ, who is our redemptive Savior, we will never have fulfillment. That is part A of fulfillment. is intimacy with God. Until we have that relationship with Jesus Christ, it is impossible to have true fulfillment. But now there's a B part. So there's many Christians who solve the A part. They've accepted Christ. They pursue God in an intimate relationship. But a lot of Christians still find themselves somewhat unfulfilled. This longing, this this thing they're grappling with of fulfillment. It just doesn't feel like they've arrived yet. And to me, that's the B part. And so if you think of the right side of that heart, that side is accomplishing, is using your gifts and skills to accomplish God's purposes in the world. Meaning that you have to go to work accomplishing what God's put you on this earth to do. He created you with a specific role and a specific purpose with which to accomplish His purposes, because we are His hands and feet. And I like to use the analogy that an athlete can train and be as extremely skillful and extremely prepared and extremely trained and well equipped. But it's like that Christian who has an intimacy with God, but it's like an athlete who sits on the bench and doesn't get on the playing field.
Yes.
They would be well equipped and fully prepared, but guess what? They're unfulfilled because they're not in the game. And it's like an athlete that sits on the sidelines, unable to play in the game. And so the second half of that fulfillment equation is use your gifts and passions and skills, what God's given, all your resources with which to accomplish God's purposes in the world. And those purposes are threefold. I think you can put it very specifically into three different categories. One is evangelism, bringing others, and that's done many, many, many different ways, as we know, but bringing others into a relationship with Jesus Christ. That's evangelism. It's the Great Commission. The second is discipleship, is using your skills and gifts to invest in however way you find God leading you to do that, but to grow believers up into the faith so that they then can go and create new disciples. And then finally, there's a third category that if you read the red print in the Bible and the New Testament, it's overwhelming with the love that Christ had for the poor and the needy and the widow and the orphan. And so we use our skills and gifts to care for the poor and the hurting as well. So evangelism, discipleship, and care for the poor and hurting, those are three things I think you can kind of categorize how you can accomplish God's purposes, because those are His purposes in the world, as the Scripture teaches.
Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation today with Michael Kendrick as we talk about his book, Your Blueprint for Life. If you're taking some notes, you might put down your passions, your gifts, as well as God's purposes, and that equals your calling. And we'll talk a little bit more about this idea of life impact and how to really begin to discover what God wants to do in your life. So we go to our break. This is a good time for you to visit our website, pointofview.net. You'll find out more about the Blueprint for Life, but also we encourage you to click on that button, Changing Lives, Changing the Nation. We've been in process of doing this for decades. We need your financial support. We'll be right back.
Vicky Garza started a college ministry providing biblical care and counsel to students in crisis. She did that because of what she learned on Point of View. She heard Point of View because you, or someone like you, made a donation. It all began with a gift.
You don't know when you give to Point of View who you're touching and how much that person is going to be able to touch others. It could go out and touch thousands, even millions of people because you were willing to invest in this ministry. I can't say enough about how it's touched my life and changed me completely.
Virtually everything God does in a human life involves many people and many simple acts. Vicky got involved, and I'm asking you to do the same. If you're concerned about America, invest in Point of View, and please do it right now before 2015 ends. Look for the Changing Lives, Changing the Nation banner at pointofview.net, or give using the Point of View radio app, pointofview.net, or call 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Continue our conversation today with Michael Kendrick, and if you'd like to join our conversation, it's probably one where you probably want to sit back and listen, but if we say something you'd like to ask a question, feel free to do so. 1-800-351-1212. The book is entitled Your Blueprint for Life, How to Align Your Passion, Gifts, and Calling with Eternity in Mind. Also have a link to his website, Blueprint for Life, and this is a book that really helps you develop the big five: your spiritual strategy, your relational strategy, your physical strategy, your financial strategy, and your career strategy. Also helps you understand balance. And I might just mention for a minute, Michael, that in addition to the book, which we certainly encourage people to get, it's published by Thomas Nelson, I know that you have also developed an 8-week kind of discipleship study course called Blueprint for Life. So for our listeners out here that maybe are leaders, it might be a pastor, it might be a Sunday school teacher, somebody has a small group, talk about how they can use some of the things we're talking about today in a group setting as well.
Well, thank you for mentioning that, Kerby. We do have both the book itself that was published by Thomas Nelson, which is a kind of a great overview of the whole process of finding your purpose, calling, and then developing a plan with which to live it out. And I like to say live it out in light of eternity, which we'll talk about in a minute. I'd like to talk about eternal perspective. It's a big part. But the study course is an 8-week study course that we developed, and really that's how the book came about. We've had thousands and thousands of people, and I don't know how many churches, hundreds of churches that have used Blueprint for Life as a study curriculum. But it's an 8-week small group study, which basically goes through what we've been talking about. The first few chapters deal with how do you understand this idea of purpose and calling? How do you pursue it in your life? It talks about eternal perspective. It talks about a big part of accomplishing what God may have called you to is believing, is having belief that God will give you that He will equip you and give you the skill and give you all the tools and equip you to accomplish the goals and big goals. We encourage people that go through the study to dream big and don't put a lid on what God can do through you, because some of the biggest things that have been accomplished for kingdom work have started out with very unassuming people that you would never think would go on to accomplish such great things, and it's through God's power and through His Holy Spirit that those things are done anyway. So it's not about you, it's about God working through you. And so the study gives you several weeks with which to actually develop what we call a life plan. And it's a whole plan. It's a plan around those 5 areas. It's a plan not only that allows you to kind of get a handle on your purpose and calling and then figure out how to put that into your life and actually go for it, but it's also a plan about how to love on your children and love on your wife, and what are the priorities of your relationships, and are you developing a plan that has good relational priorities of loving your spouse, your kids, your parents, and your peers. And so there's a relationship with which God is a very relational God. So it's taking care of those things that God's called us to do, but also pursuing this great life that God's given us to accomplish His purposes. So it's a very balanced approach, and it's a lot of fun. I would encourage anyone listening to check it out online, and if you feel so called, to order one of the studies and check it out, and you may want to do it in your church in a small group.
Let's get into this issue of eternal perspective. My latest book, Periscope, talks about that, and we've really found out, even in some of the surveys that we've done with George Barna, especially focusing primarily on millennials, that's the watershed. If you have an eternal perspective and recognize that you're living for eternity, that really changes your worldview. It changes your practice. And again, one of the things I love about your book is you spend some time really helping us understand that we really need to come to our calling and our gifts with an eternal perspective.
Kerby, it's one of the most important aspects of the whole, what we teach in the book. And it's really one of the most important aspects of the Christian life. And really, what we talk about eternal perspective, somebody might be asking, well, what is an eternal perspective? What does that mean? really what that means is getting your head around the fact that this life is like a shutterfly, like a camera, the speed of a camera shutterfly in light of eternity. I think of it as a microscopic dot on an infinite timeline, if you can get that picture. But here's the key, is this life, it determines what that infinite line is going to be like for us. First of all, with a salvation decision, which is a decision to embrace Jesus Christ as your Savior, which is the only way with which to have fellowship with God forever. Christ says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, the only way. And so that's the first decision. But then there's another decision, and this can be a little controversial in the theological realms, but I don't ever shy away from talking about it because I believe it with all my heart, and I think Scripture very much backs this up, is that heaven's not going to be the same for everyone. We are going to be rewarded in heaven, and we don't know what those rewards look like, and all we know is if God's given them, they're going to be amazingly wonderful. And each of us is going to be rewarded based on what we've done with this life. This life is a test. It's a stewardship test. And I want to read a couple of scriptures on that point because it really speaks to the eternal perspective. But a couple of scriptures that I have is Mark 9:41. These are NIV translations. Mark 9:41 says, "Truly I tell you, anyone who gives you a cup of water in my name, because you belong to the Messiah, will certainly not lose their reward." So the scripture says even a cup of water will be rewarded. In Matthew 16:27, it says, "For the Son of Man is going to come in his Father's glory with his angels, and then he will reward each person according to what they have done." And I believe the Bible teaches about a Bema Seat judgment, which is the judgment of the believer, not the great white throne judgment, which is the judgment of the unbeliever, but the Bema Seat, where we are held accountable in a good way for what we've done in this life. So if you believe that, and I would challenge you to go study the scriptures if you don't, is if you believe that, boy, you should bound out of bed every day thinking, oh my gosh, I've got 16 hours today with which to impact eternity. I mean, that's amazing. And it's what God's called us to anyway, but he says he will reward us for doing that well. And so with that eternal perspective, it changes everything you do, everything. It's the fuel with which inspires you to go live this amazing life of fulfillment and joy, but that you're going to be rewarded as well. I mean, it's just amazing that God gives us this wonderful gift. And so it's something that I think really changes a Christian's whole perspective on life if you get your head around that.
How do you put these ideas of the big five together, the spiritual, relational, physical, financial, and career impact and strategy? It seems to me, obviously, you need to go through the book as well as through the discipleship material, but in general, how do we pull all that together? It seems to me that we have to keep it in tension, but also keep it in balance, don't we?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, we can all give stories of people who've gotten out of balance. I mean, some of the best examples are pastors that have gotten, or people ministry. Let's not pick on pastors here, but just people in ministry that have been so zealous for the ministry that they've basically kind of gotten out of balance with their family.
Yes.
Because they've given all their time to the Lord's work, and the Lord hasn't called us to do that. He's called us to love on our children, our wives, and our parents, and take care of those that He's entrusted us with, but also pursue His kingdom work, but in balance. And we've seen people that pursue, whether it be career, and let their health deteriorate as a result of not being in balance. They don't exercise and eat right, and so we can't go through this life and accomplish a whole lot for the kingdom work if we're in a hospital bed or just no energy, just because we don't have energy and vitality. And so all of these things are in balance, but Kerby, there's a really great process with which this kind of big five, these kind of verticals or buckets that we drop things in, with which we have some exercises in the study as well as the book for you to do. And it's fun because what we do is we say, basically it's a dreaming exercise. It's an exercise of just in a quiet space, just get a piece of paper out, a blank sheet of paper, and be totally unconstrained. Like, don't let anything inhibit your thoughts. Don't say, well, that's hard, or I can't do that because I don't have enough money or time. No, just let all of that go and just say, what would you do if you couldn't fail? And you knew that, you could not fail. You were going to be 100% successful. What is that that's in your heart that would just bubble out and say, oh, I would love to, I would love to adopt, I would love to foster some children. I would love to start a new ministry to care for the homeless. I would love to, be a pastor or a teacher. I'd love to take care of, the elderly. What is in your heart that God's really passionate you for?
We'll be right back.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes with Michael Kendrick as we talk about his book, Your Blueprint for Life, How to Align Your Passion, Gifts, and Calling with Eternity in Mind. And, Michael, you're talking about taking out a blank piece of paper. Can't fail. Don't have to worry about cost. Don't worry about whether or not it makes sense. And really kind of a blue sky or blank page, blank board kind of evaluation. But then what do you encourage people to do once they've had a chance to dream those dreams?
Well, it's such a fun exercise to just get your heart out on paper and just let the Spirit lead, so to speak, but be uninhibited by what we many times try to overthink something. Because really, once you've done that and you look back and you say, okay, what's on this sheet of paper now that that I've done. And I'd say spend at least 20, 30 minutes to an hour. I mean, as long as it takes to really get some things down on paper, but then step back and look at what's there. And see, I believe that God has placed our purpose it's in our fingerprints, it's in our DNA, it's God's made us unique with a very specific passions and in our heart. And so when you look at that paper and you look at the list of things that you've written down, and I would encourage you to also just write down things that you want to accomplish or want to do for fun. You've always wanted to learn Spanish, or you've always wanted to go climb Mount Kilimanjaro, or whatever it might be. Get your pilot's license. I mean, what is it that God's kind of placed in there that, boy, if you were just set free, you'd go chase after these different things? See, that's the passions, and I believe if you are pursuing God with a faithful heart, those things are holy. Those things aren't carnal. They're holy. They've been put in there by God. And so look at that and say, what is the common threads? What kind of picture is starting to evolve here? Because remember, God can use many, many, many things to accomplish His purposes. It don't always have to be very conventional. We could come up with lots of examples of that. But look at that paper, find out what is it that's in the fingerprints of your soul, and kind of just dwell on that. And I think God will start showing you a picture of how He's passionate and skilled you, and then think about ways with which you can use what you have and use your passions to accomplish maximum impact for God's kingdom. Look at ways to, where's my biggest leverage? What is God uniquely made me for that I can do uniquely? I always ask people, think about what you do with ease, that it seems like, yeah, other people can do it, but they seem to have to try harder. They seem to have to struggle. I just do that easily. It's like, that's not hard for me. Those are the things that God has. That's your sharpest knife in the drawer, so to speak. Pull out the sharp knife to cut. Don't pull out the butter knife to cut a steak. So use what God's equipped you for to go accomplish His purposes. So this is a wonderful exercise. A lot to talk about in the few minutes we have here, Kerby, but these are the kind of things that you do. And then one last thing on this exercise piece that we love to do, and there's lots of exercises in the book and in the study curriculum, but what we call the rocking chair test. And this helps, this is the sifter that sifts a lot of these ideas through. So imagine you're 80, 85 years old, however long you think you might live before your last days on earth, and imagine yourself in a rocking chair looking back on your life. And you say, okay, if I look back on my life, what is it that I'd be most regretful about if I did not accomplish that? What are those deep regrets you would have if you missed them? If you just missed them, if life got too busy? Well, one might be playing with spending quality time with your children and your family. That may be top of the list, or your parents as they become up in the years. I mean, honoring them and spending time with them and doing what's necessary for your parents. We all have parents. So what are those things that you would be most regretful for? And that kind of shakes the list out a little bit. And so these are the type of exercises that are in the book, Kerby, that will help you really come away with this life plan. And this life plan is ever changing. It's not meant to be, hey, we wrote it out and it's static. It is ever changing. But that's the beauty of it, is it's a wonderful discovery process that God takes us on.
Well, again, the book is entitled Your Blueprint for Life, How to Align Your Passion, Gifts, and Calling with Eternity in Mind. It's published by Thomas Nelson. Might be able to find it in your local bookstore, but of course we do have some links to Blueprint for Life. And also, let me just mention again, as we talked about a little bit earlier, this 8-week discipleship study course on Blueprint for Life. And you might also find some of the other books, Fulfillment Factor, Rich Forever, and so many others that are going to be resources that you would certainly want to get a copy of. And as you go to our website, pointofview.net, click on that second button. The first one is for the book. The second one is for blueprintforlife.com. And you can find all the resources there. And I appreciate, Michael, the time and energy you've put into this book, the fact that you've started so many of these new Christian nonprofit organizations. And it's just been a delight to have you on the program with us today.
Well, Kerby, it's my pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for the time to spend, and I hope you have a Merry Christmas and a great 2016 ahead.
Okay, well, thank you very much. So again, Michael Kendrick, and he is the author of the book, Your Blueprint for Life. You will find out a lot more about the curriculum. And again, those of you that are involved in ministry, some of you may even be able to trace back some of the work that he's done over the years. And I did mention iDisciple. That's a great platform for some of that material as well. Just before we run out of time, let's talk about, again, the importance of changing lives. And when you've heard us talk, we've talked about some of the stories. Kelly Shackelford, of course, with us on Friday. And he was actually listening to Point of View when he was in law school. And that sort of gave him the idea that, maybe he could actually have a full-time career defending religious liberty in the courts. And look what has happened there. Last week, I talked about the story of Lee Weaver, individual that was listening to this program and decided to start a crisis pregnancy center. And I had a chance this fall to actually speak to their group, and what a great turnout that they had and how successful they have been in these many years. Crisis Pregnancy Center back in the 1980s, now they call them Pregnancy Resource Centers, and just the number of babies that have been saved through that Crisis Pregnancy Center. We've talked in the past about Rodney Hare, who listened to Marlon and me and Penna and others talk about humanism in the schools and said, I need to do something about this, and established a Christian school that has, again, just been able to change the lives of tens of thousands of students. Jeremy Dice has been on this program and oftentimes sits across the table from me. You might have seen him on Fox News just the other day, and he said he actually listened to Point of View in the back seat of his mother's car, which kind of makes me feel a little bit old. But again, a great story of an individual that is now a senior counsel for Liberty Institute. And of course, the one we're featuring here today, and that is the story of Vicky Garza, who started a campus ministry to really begin to impact the lives of students in a way that has not really been done in the past. And so again, her success is due in large part to the fact that in the past there were people like you who gave to Point of View, and that was an opportunity to change her life. And of course, now she's changing the lives of so many college students. And as we talk about some of these stories, I just encourage you to think about what you might do to support this ministry. You're supporting not just the radio ministry, but also the videos that we produce and all the other resources and the Outlook magazine that we make available and all the ways we try to educate you. But you're influencing a lot more than just a radio listening audience. You're influencing the untold lives of other individuals who are impacted by those who hear this program. So if you benefited at all this year from some of the things that we've talked about, some of the perspectives we've given to you, and the whole idea of developing a Christian world and life view, let me encourage you to visit the website pointofview.net. Click on that button that says Changing Lives, Changing the Nation. We're all about changing lives, and of course that will change the direction of the nation, and we certainly appreciate those of you that have supported us in the past and encourage all of you to consider what you might do before the end of the year. I want to thank Andrew, Catherine, and Chris for their help behind the scenes. Have a great day, and we will see you back here tomorrow.
Vicky Garza started a college ministry, providing biblical care and counsel to students in crisis. She did that because of what she learned on Point of View. She heard Point of View because you, or someone like you, made a donation. It all began with a gift.
You don't know when you give to Point of View who you're touching and how much that person is going to be able to touch others. It could go out and touch thousands, even millions of people because you were willing to invest in this ministry. I can't say enough about how it's touched my life and changed me completely.
Virtually everything God does in a human life involves many people and many simple acts. Vicky got involved, and I'm asking you to do the same. If you're concerned about America, invest in Point of View, and please do it right now before 2015 ends. Look for the Changing Lives, Changing the Nation banner at pointofview.net, or give using the Point of View radio app, pointofview.net, or call 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.